And we're wondering if maybe you want to share with us the why are we in Pathways?
Yes, thank you so much, Julie, and good morning, District 1. Great to see you all bright and early and shiny faces. Isn't technology fabulous? Here I'm sitting in Victoria, British Columbia, Canada, attending TLI in District 1. I want to talk a bit about how Pathways started and the process we went through developing it to give you some understanding of the philosophy in the curriculum design. And so quite a number of years ago, when I was just coming off the board, we had identified the various leadership and communication competencies that we had gleaned from members saying that this is what they had learned or were triggered to learn in the Toastmasters programs from start to finish. So we compiled those competencies, of which there were hundreds of them. And then we said, how do we move forward with the curriculum design from here? We know that in our programs that our clients or our customers or our members love to have input, and that was critical in this project as well. So we went to the membership worldwide and we asked for applications for people who had an interest in working on the design of the new education program. To our overjoy and dismay, we had over 2,000 people apply, and that was a bit too big of a committee. So we went through a process and we selected 250 learning masters from worldwide. Now, anybody in the audience who was a learning master, holler out. Thank you so much, because there was representation for the most part from a lot of districts, certainly every region in the world, and I thank you again for your service on that committee. It took a lot longer than we originally thought it would, but I think we got to a place where we were proud of our product. So our role as learning masters was to look at the current curriculum and build it into new curriculum. And as the manager of learning masters, and my background is curriculum design and adult education, so having selected 250 people of very diverse backgrounds, so just to give you a sense of who they were, we picked people who were very tech savvy, either did internet design, online, we're real deep into programming, all those kinds of skills we wanted on our team. We got people who worked like me as curriculum designers, adult educators. We had university professors, we had high school principals and teachers, we had elementary, so we had academia represented, and those people that worked in the corporate world in education as well. We also looked at on a cross section of having brand new members. So I believe our youngest learning master participant had been in Toastmasters for 6 months. So we wanted really new members, and we wanted those of us that are longer in the tooth in the program and have been around since long before CC and CL came about. So we found that representation, and then we went to work. One of the concepts that's really important for me when I design curriculum or redesign something is similar to those house renovation programs that we see on TV, is that I tend to tear down everything except the outside walls, and am willing to add on or add a story if necessary, to use that analogy. So when we tore down the existing Toastmasters program of CC, CL, and all our advanced manuals, we knew from history that CLs often didn't even show up in club meetings. We had low completion rate of that, and a lot of people were confused of the two programs. So we wanted to mesh them again. We also looked at cornerstones. So from our membership, we heard very strongly that DTM could not go away, that was a sacred element of Toastmasters. And then we also looked at what was our unique learning proposition as an organization of education. And we realized that there were things that made our organization complete and unique, and that we had to keep them. And those cornerstones of our building of the new curriculum became the mentoring and peer training, because we're unique, we don't have instructors. The evaluation, the peer evaluation, that we function in a club formation, that we gather together, whether that's virtually or person to person, and we have that club meeting. Providing oral evaluations to one another, again, was one of those cornerstones that wasn't going anywhere, and it needed to be experiential. In other words, people had to get in, and we learn by doing. It's a practical skill that we learn by getting up and doing it in front of people, thus building confidence, self-esteem, etc. So those were the cornerstones that stayed sacred to when we started designing. And now we have a flat foundation with, and we just started looking at what do we want to do. So we were getting feedback continuously through this process from the learning masters going into their clubs, having conversations at area level. And we saw that was very valuable to have that feedback. The other thing that we did once we were finished completing the project, that we ran pilots to get feedback. So a number of people in just various districts around the world raised their hands and became trial and error people on the new curriculum and tested out, and then gave us a bunch of feedback on the curriculum. And then we again tweaked the curriculum according to their feedback, which was invaluable. So when we looked at building the curriculum, there were a couple of philosophical discussions, well, many philosophical discussions that we had around building the new curriculum. First of all, we had a long debate about whether we should turn into a pass or fail program, because a lot of people felt that people were just ticking their own manuals and passing through the program. And we, after much discussion, decided that we would continue on the honor system in the club to hold that standard of evaluation and having people complete their manuals, and also to recommend that people have permission within their clubs to ask people to repeat a project if they haven't met the criteria or the objectives. We also built in self-reflection in the program. So you'll see in some projects where you're required to do self-reflection, and in a lot of the projects there's a self-assessment at the beginning and a self-assessment at the end of the projects, because we wanted people to reflect back on what we actually learned during that process. So when we started developing the curriculum, another idea that we had and we used is we completed the profile of 5 major client sets who would come into Toastmasters, because we thought we have to build it to meet the needs of the people who arrive. And we have huge diversity in who arrives in our meetings. So one of those personas was the professional speaker who arrives in our clubs, not necessarily wanting speaking skills, but looking for feedback. And so we had to keep that in mind when we developed curriculum. We also looked at the students who come in and maybe with us for a short term, but need some basic skills to get through their college or university courses, and may then go away after a short term, but hopefully have a great experience and return later to represent the next group, which was those people who are building careers, mid-career people working, needing skills, perhaps even sent by their employer or in a program where they're employer actually built the program, had a club in-house. Another group that we identified was those people who have left the workforce but want to stay mentally active and contribute to their well-being through activities, and also to be part of communication and leadership development. And the other persona that was represented was those who come with English as perhaps their second, third, fourth, fifth language, and which there's a huge representation also in Toastmasters. So keeping all those personas in mind, they became a benchmark that we used when we were designing something to look against those clients, potential members, and say, are we meeting their needs? We knew that it was going to be hugely online because 95 years of being paper-based was great, and we also knew that we were going to need to allow and provide for a paper-based enrollment for people that weren't online, people that were adverse to doing that. But that the huge population that we got feedback from really wanted to be able to load this on their tablets, on their phones, on their laptops. And we heard more and more about people who were arriving at their club meetings with their laptops or their tablets already sitting and doing feedback and taking notes that way and running their agendas. So we knew that that was the way of the future, and particularly to keep as our younger members enrolled in Toastmasters, to keep them engaged and connected. The other challenge that we recognized was that in the communication and leadership being separate paths, we knew that those had to be combined. And the essential part of combining them was to review all the criteria that were in the previous manuals and make sure that they were included in the current Pathways program. The components are there. They might not all be named the same things they were named before. They may not appear the same way they did before, but they were all looked at and ensured that they were included. So one of the things that I'm super excited about, because Learning Masters worked, I think, between 2 and 3 years on developing this curriculum. And then, as I said, it was tested by several people and districts, and that was, the feedback was implemented again. And then it was sent back to World Headquarters, where another group took over to loading it into the learning management system that then effectively could deliver it to our organization worldwide. So I'll just speak for a moment about learning management systems, because again, I've worked with that in the corporate world, and that was one of our great challenges. I wasn't involved in that in the Pathways program, but one of the greatest challenges in finding a learning management system to deliver in 140 some countries, various languages, and hundreds of thousands of clients that are signing into that system is to find something that's robust enough and holds the diversity that our programs provide, as well as being solid so that it doesn't collapse on us, and to accommodate 400,000 plus people who sign in. So that was, it was customized for our program and built on a foundation that was identified originally. So I'll quit talking about Learning Masters and how we came about it so to allow time for questions. But I do want to say that as the manager of Learning Masters, the time that our members put into the program was breathtakingly fabulous and very much acknowledged, and we couldn't have built it without them and that input. So now it's been, the baton's been handed to the chief ambassadors and our guides who are out helping each one of us get online. And my district hasn't yet gone online. We're supposed to be going live in end of March, and my club has talked as an executive, and we're converting all our members over to Pathways automatically. and those that want to continue in the current program can continue and complete. But we also recognize that every new member that comes in the door has to go to Pathways now. And so I hope to be the very first person in my club to do a project and get underway in Pathways. So I hope you feel that excitement also, and that you enjoy your Pathways experience. And I know it'll be around for a long time. And thank you for listening and your curiosity about the curriculum building of Pathways and how it came about.
District 57 has been on Pathways for almost a year. And I had the privilege of leading a team that brought knowledge of Pathways out to all of our clubs. So with a year's experience, we've had a lot of people that have participated, they've earned awards. We've also begun to understand where the challenges are. The content itself, the Pathways content itself, is very well received and very well understood. What's new is that we're doing more online management of our program than we've done before. And those are areas where we have more challenges. So what I'm going to do is to walk you through what I call a fast start and help you understand what is the key issues and how to get started. So here we go. I see we have Pat now too.
I'm in.
All right, good. All right, so can everyone see my slides? Yeah! Yay, team, slides. Fast start. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is very, very briefly compare the two programs. You're going to hear a lot more from Pat about how the program was created, but I'm just going to very, very briefly compare them. So first of all, here's a traditional program chart if you wanted to go to all the way to DTM. Is that familiar? Yes. What do? We do a competent leader, competent communication, a couple of manuals for the bronze, a couple more manuals and other things for the silver, more communications for the gold, and then on the leadership track, you do your competent leader, you'd be a club officer with all that involves, and the big one, the advanced leader silver with the district officer, sponsor, mentor, coach. And that would earn you a DTM. I've earned 3 of those so far. Now, how does that compare to Pathways? If we take the same idea of what does it take to get to DTM, we'll start with the new member. The new member will complete an entire path. Remember, we don't have a communications and a leadership now, they're both included. They would complete a second path, and then they would complete some very familiar requirements. Be a club sponsor, or do a speech craft, or a youth leadership. Be a club mentor or a club coach. Serve as a club officer, 12 months now, not 6. And that district officer service is always required. Once you complete those, you can do the DTM project, formerly known as the capstone, and you will then have earned the Distinguished Toastmaster Award. Looks great. Shall we get started? Now, the hardest part of any project is, in fact, getting started. So what I'm going to do is to walk you through briefly the key steps in actually working Basecamp, working the Pathways project. The projects themselves you're going to love. Many are familiar, some are new, but let's see how we get into it. I'm going to take you through entering Pathways, selecting a path, opening your first project, and the all-important submitting awards. How do we get into Pathways? Well, right on the Toastmaster homepage, we have a Pathways menu item. We're going to click it. Right now, what we want to do is choose a path. So we're going to choose a path. To do that, you're going to need to log in. If you already have set up your Toastmaster login, you're all set. If you've never done it before, the instructions are right there on the page on how to set up your account the first time. No problem, right? Once you've logged in, you're at the Pathways welcome screen. Now, you use some of these for various purposes, but right now we have one purpose. We want to get our path. So we're going to click the button that says Continue to Path Selection. I got two ways to get a path. I can get printed materials, get a bound manual, but 99.9% of all the members so far have chosen the online experience. So let's do that. Let's pick a path online. We're going to take an assessment. Now, there's 10 different paths. They emphasize different aspects. And Toastmasters has set up an assessment quiz to help you decide. You're not obligated to take this. If you know what path you want, by all means, you can skip this and go on. But it's useful, and generally, it's very accurate. When you go into this, it's going to ask you some questions, what topics you're interested in. And based on the answers you give, it's going to ask you additional follow-up questions to try to figure out what's most important to you. Eventually, you will come up with 3 recommended paths. You want to take a look at those. One of them is probably going to be what you want to do. You're not obligated to take those. You could pick another path if you like. There's 10 to choose from. How can you find out more about these paths beyond the paragraph that's there? Any details, you get details on the District 57 website. Right there is the URL. I have set up a pathways section. And one file is very, very useful. It's called the Pathways Path and Project Catalog. What this has is a list of all the paths. For each path, it has a list of all the projects by name, required and electives. And if you click into it, it will even give you the summary of each project. So you can find out exactly what's in any path if you want to. So now we've picked a path. Remember, your first one is free. If you were in 2 clubs when you launched, your first 2 were free. Yay. We've entered pathways. We've selected a path. Now let's get started. Let's open that first project. Back to the welcome screen. Before we picked a path, now we want to go into Basecamp. This is the path, the method you will normally use whenever you open up Basecamp. You can log in as a member. If you're in more than one club, you pick which club you want to log in as. And you get the home screen. You'll see this screen a lot. This is the starting point for everything you do. There's useful things behind every one of those big buttons. The first time you come in, you want to go to the check compatibility. Learning management systems, including this one, tend to bring up new windows to show you material, and your browser calls out a pop-up and is probably trying to block them. The material behind the check compatibility will show you how to turn off pop-up blockers just for Basecamp, okay? But let's get started. We're going to go into the transcript. Here I have the transcript. This is an early version from when I only had one path showing. There's my path, innovative planning. That's the one I picked first. Well, I want to go into it. What I'm going to do, I'm going to open the curriculum. Here's a tip. In Basecamp, we have curriculums. A curriculum is the same as a path. Got that? A curriculum equals a path. So we're going to open our path. There it is. There are my 3 projects in my first level of my path. I like to get started. Let's go to that icebreaker. I'm going to click on the activate button. It's going to turn into a launch button. I click on it and bang, I'm in. I am now looking at the first screen of my icebreaker project. I can click begin and it will walk me through there. The icebreaker you'll find, by the way, although there's lots more material about it, more helpful information, tutorials and so forth, is in fact the icebreaker we know and love. So jump in and do it. You say, oh, I don't do another icebreaker, George? Oh, come on now. I've done 13 of them. They're great. I haven't repeated myself yet. So now we have entered a path. We've selected a path. We've opened our first project. Now let's go forward in time just a little bit and say, I've completed a level and I want to submit the award. What happens there? This is slightly more involved than it is with the manual, so we're going to walk you through it. It's straightforward, but you need to know the steps. So there's completing projects, there's completing levels, and there's submitting awards. Who does what? Well, the member, of course, is going to complete the project. for the first few projects, that's simply giving a speech. In later projects, there's some more involved processes. Once you complete it, you're going to go back into your project. Instead of initialing on your monitor screen to say you did it, you're going to go back in and say, yes, I completed this one. And you're going to complete the assess your skills after questionnaire. How does that work? You reopen the project. At the bottom here, I'm going to jump directly to assess your skills after. It's going to take me to a short list of questions where I answer, and this is for you. This doesn't get shown to anyone else. This is just for you, where you can go back and see how you're doing before and how you're doing after. So you click your answers, answer a few questions, and you're done. There is no approval needed to go on to another project within the same level. No approval needed. Now, let's say we complete all those projects in that level, and we want to submit it. So to complete a level, you're going to do something a little different. You're going to run the level completion task in your path. What in the world does that mean? So back to here I am back in my path. This time I've jumped over to motivational strategies, and I have completed all of the projects in this level. How do you know I completed the projects? Because all the projects have a nice little red check mark beside them. So I want to mark it done. Again, I'm going to tell the system I'm completed with this. I'm going to activate the completion request. Click on a button, mark it complete, and I'm done. As a member, I've now said I've completed this. Now what you're doing with that is you're requesting your VPE to approve it. It's kind of like asking your VPE to look in the back of your book and initial that you completed the work, isn't it? Let's see what's involved with that. So we've completed the project, we've completed a level, we've said it's completed. You need to notify your VPE and the other Basecamp managers about this. The other Basecamp managers are your president and your secretary. Why do you need to notify them? Because the way the program is structured, it's to be done in order, and so your level completion must be approved for you to move on to level 2. The system supposedly automatically notifies the VPE. My advice to you as a best practice is you tell them directly, because you need them to do it quickly. So now the Basecamp managers heard about it, the VPE, the president or secretary. They want to mark the member's level as approved or have a discussion about what may not have been done. So you're going to log in. The VPE will log in as a Basecamp manager back at the Start Pathways. The Basecamp manager will have 3 buttons. These are all useful. There's tutorials, there's some summary reports for progress, and there's pending requests. That's what we care about right now. So we're going to click there. And when the VPE opens up the screen, you'll get a list of everyone who has completed a level and is requesting approval. It's very simple. There's over on the right-hand side, there's a green check mark for yes, approved. There's a red X for disapproved. You click on that check mark and the member is approved and can now proceed to the next level. One more thing, submitting the award. In Basecamp, approving the level is not the same as submitting the award. Why? Because it is still up to the member when and where their awards are submitted. If you're in more than one club, you know that you think about what clubs you're giving your award to. So approving the award is very straightforward. It is almost exactly the same process in Club Central. The only difference is you no longer have to enter dates and speech titles. Isn't that nice? So let's get started on pathways. Why? First, set a great example to all your members, especially your officers. Understand the program. Even if you're working on those last parts for your DTM, if you do a little bit of pathways so you understand the program, that means you'll be able to help your new members, because you need to be able to help them, don't you? So that is, in a nutshell, how to get started on pathways. Back to you.
I'm going to turn it over to our program quality director, Margaret. Everyone roll.
So it's kind of like playing telephone, okay? So you ask the question, I'm going to repeat it, so both of them, Pat and George, can hear it.
Okay. My question is about evaluations. You mentioned everything. They haven't mentioned evaluations. I did my first project. I had someone evaluate it, and then I got votes.
Okay. So Pat and George, can you give a little bit more explanation of how Pathways works with the evaluation process?
Sure, let me speak to that. So in the club, there are practically no differences in the way the club meeting actually operates. In fact, I doubt you could tell where the club is on Pathways or not just by observing. But here's specifically how evaluations work. Today, you bring your manual in. It's got an evaluation page in the back. The evaluator fills it out. Each project in Pathways does have an evaluation resource. It's called a resource. They've been cleaned up and made more consistent than in the past. And the evaluator will still listen to the speech, fill it out, and give an oral feedback. The difference is there's multiple choices. What's happening most commonly right now is that the speaker will print out the evaluation resource and give it to the evaluator to write on, who will then give it back. Other alternatives are the club might choose to keep in stock some of the evaluation resources, the common ones like level 1. And in some techie clubs, the ones Pat mentioned where they always bring their laptop anyway, they can, if they want to, fill out that evaluation online. Any way you do it, the evaluation goes back to the member. It's the member's choice as to whether to save it or to upload it into their Basecamp. No one else can put a document into your Basecamp. So evaluations are essentially the same. There are more choices on the media and how it's actually given back.
Thank you very much, George. That was an excellent answer.
One more question. If you was doing a traditional way and you transition to the path, how do you get credit? How on that happen?
So the question is if you have been working on the traditional program all this time and you want to utilize the things that you did on the traditional program to utilize it into Pathways.
That's for you, Pat.
Thanks, George. Is there anyone else on this line? Well, when we first originally started designing, there was a hope that we would be able to take credits from the current program and transition them for an equivalency over into Pathways. As we developed Pathways curriculum, we discovered that that was going to be absolutely nightmarish. So we've asked people to complete what they're working on and to finish whatever projects they're working on now in the old system and then transition to Pathways. There's no way to transition that. But what I want to say about that is that it's really important to remember, and this is more on a philosophical, practical level, that we're in an education program. And what I know is that I've never lost what I've learned. So while I may not have the designation that transfers over, I have learned a tremendous amount. So when I go in to do my initial assessment to determine what path I go into, I'm coming in from a very different place that I would have come into 5 years ago in Toastmasters because I bring a whole bunch of learning. I would suspect that the projects will be easier for you, or you may be in a project or in a path that you had never anticipated that you would now be in. So you have, I believe George probably mentioned that you have you have 2 years from the date when the very last district is implemented with Pathways. So you have approximately 2.5 years from right now to complete whatever you're working in the old program before you need to go to Pathways because the old program will fall away. Now, I've heard people say, well, that's not long enough. And my response is that you know the deadline, and if you want to achieve it, set a goal, map out a project plan, work the plan, and complete it. If that's important to you, you'll just need to make it a priority, and it can be done. I just completed another DTM. I'm like George, we're piling them up. And I just completed mine and did all the paperwork because I wanted to be ready to go in March for Pathways. Now, I had to get the cooperation of my Ed VP to get me signed up for the projects I needed to complete. And, you know, I also had to be committed to get the paperwork done. So I just encourage everybody to be brave, be the early adopters in your district, because you are the leaders. People will look at you in the clubs and in your district and say, why should I go? And I can't encourage someone to go if I'm not willing to jump. And I know that this is a very safe vehicle to get into. And George has seen it implemented, and he's got good words to say about the curriculum. So I just encourage you all to be early adopters in your district. Be brave, be bold, be courageous like every leader needs to be, and become a Pathways advocate. And become a zealot like me.
Very good. Thank you very much, both of you, for all of your experience. Thank you.
Thank you very much.